I recently visited Iceland for the first time with my partner Soph, and before going we'd heard loads about just how expensive Iceland was. In this video I'll break down all of the costs from the flights and accommodation to the activities that we did as well. And just something to note, all of the costs will be as if it was for 2 people unless I say otherwise. But hopefully in sharing our budget breakdown I can give you an insight into how much your trip could potentially cost. Okay, so I've seen some budget breakdowns on YouTube where they keep you on the hook until the very end and don't tell you how much it's going to cost. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to tell you exactly how much it was up front. The whole trip cost us £2,895 for the 6 days that we were there, and that's breaking down as follows. So we've got £541 on the flights and the airport parking, we've got £522 on accommodation, £773 on transport, £770 on activities and £289 on miscellaneous expenses, things like food and drink. Okay, so let's dive deeper into each of these categories now, starting with the flights. Of course, flights are the starting point for most international holidays, and so the cost can vary wildly depending on where the starting location is. Our flights were booked with a budget Icelandic airline called Flyplay. I'd never heard of them before, but they were cheap and they did the job. We flew from London Stansted to Reykjavik for a total cost of around 453 quid, which was pretty good at the time. We were quite happy with that. We thought it was fairly cheapish to get to Iceland. And in this category, I'm also going to bundle in the airport parking as well. So for 6 days, it cost us around 88 quid. So overall in this category, we've got 2 expenses, the flights and the parking, and together they cost £541. With our flights and parking booked, the next big expense was the accommodation. Iceland isn't exactly known for its cheap 5-star hotels. So we spent 5 of our 6 nights in a hostel. I'd done it loads of times before. It was Soph's first time, but she found it absolutely fine. It's definitely an area where you can save a good amount of money. If you have to go for hotels, it really does bump the price up. For the first 3 nights of our trip, we were based in Reykjavik at Baron's Hostel in an 8-bed mixed dorm room, which cost us around £83 per night. In Iceland, I'd say this was pretty good value for money because the property was located fairly centrally. It was just round the corner from Hallgrímskirkja, which is the big tall church in Reykjavik. Some of the hotels were just horrendously priced, so if you can stomach spending some nights in a hostel, you can really save a lot of money here. Our second place was also a hostel called The Barn, situated on the outskirts of a town called Vik on the south coast, which cost us £103 per night. And for properties in and around Vik, you're not going to find much cheaper unless you want to really compromise on the quality or go camping, which we didn't fancy really. The Barn was a really nice hostel, and it was actually the first time I'd ever stayed in a double bed in a hostel. Finally, our last night in Reykjavik was in a guest house, which cost us £100 per night. It was pretty basic, shared bathroom facilities, but we opted to stay in a guest house rather than a hostel in Reykjavik, just so that we didn't disturb anyone in a dorm room getting up at like 2 AM or whatever it was for the airport in the morning. All in all then, we spent £555 on accommodation, and if you average that out over the 6 nights, it's roughly £93 per night. We obviously needed to travel between all these accommodations, so we're going to move on to transport now, and I can break this down into roughly 4 expenses. The first of which is the £54 that we spent on the Flybus, which is the public transport bus from the airport to downtown Reykjavik. Convenient, quick, not worth getting a taxi over. Then when we were in Reykjavik, we spent around £293 on Uber and the electric scooters that they've got there. There's 2 scooter apps, one is called Hop and one is called Zolo. Both are just as good as each other and as accessible as the other as well. We definitely could have walked more to cut down these costs, but we were just trying to preserve our legs for as long as possible. We were both a bit dodgy at the time, so it was a case of just prevention's better than cure. Then onto the car rental from Avis. We rented a Dacia Duster for 3 days, which cost us around £78 per day. We wanted a 4x4 because we'd heard that the roads weren't in the best conditions, lots of loose gravel, uneven surfaces, so we wanted to play it safe and just get a 4x4. Even on the main ring road, the roads are also dodgy, so I actually spent an extra £245 on insurance. Now this is a totally optional expense, but I didn't want to take the risk in case we damaged the car and we weren't fully insured for it. And I'm actually really glad that I did take this option, because on day 1 of having the car, a stone flicked up on my windscreen from a car that was probably speeding on the opposite side of the road, flicked up, hit my windscreen and cracked my windscreen. Day 1 in Iceland. I'd had 10 years of driving in the UK and I've never had a windscreen crack. 24 hours in Iceland, 1 crack. So it's up to you if you want to take the risk or not, but Avis wanted to charge me £450 for that expense, but obviously I was covered with the insurance. So in total, transport cost us £773. So now moving on to the activities that we did, which I think is the fun part of this budget breakdown. We spent £770 on 7 different activities. I'll link how to book them or where to book them in the description of the video if you're interested. I'll go through each of the activities, tell you how much they cost, and give you some sort of value for money score as well, just so that you can see if it's worth it or not, in my own opinion and experience. The most expensive activity that we did was the 3-hour hike on the glacier. This cost us £168. And if you've never stood on a glacier before, then for me this is great value for money. I'd probably give this an 8 out of 10 value for money score. The only reason I've marked this activity down is because it's quite a beginner friendly tour, and if you've already stood on the glacier before, then it's probably quite familiar already to you, so not got that wow factor as if it's the first time where, you know, it's just like, wow, I'm on a glacier right now. It's also fairly expensive, but you do have to remember the equipment that you got is quite specialist, so I think warranted. Next on the list is the whale watching tour, which cost us £148. And similar to the glacier hike, if you've never seen a humpback whale in the wild before, then it's an incredible tour. The company basically guarantee that you'll see a whale, and if you don't, they'll say, right, pack your bags, you're going tomorrow for free. So them being supremely confident that you are going to see a whale makes you super confident as well. This tour was a pricey one, but for the happiness of seeing a whale for the first time, it was so worth it. So I'm going to give this a score of 9 out of 10 on the value for money. Of course, one thing to remember is, although the companies absolutely guarantee you'll see one, I've always been a bit cautious with that. You know, it is a wild animal at the end of the day, and you can't predict everything that they do. So just have that in mind when you are going to that tour. The first and last tours that we did in Iceland were both thermal spas / geothermal areas. The first of which was the Sky Lagoon 7-step pure package, which cost us £114. And I'm going to give this a value for money score of about 6 out of 10. But it could be a lot higher if you're into that kind of thing. And what I mean by that is, of the 7 steps, I enjoyed the first one, which was the lagoon. The second one, which was the cold plunge, that was just a bit of fun really. And then the 3rd step through to the 7th step, I found it a little bit unnecessary really. Like the steam room and the sauna room, I was just sweating like mad in there. I didn't find it that relaxing. So it's really down to taste, I guess. You know, if you're into it, if you are into that, 6 out of 10 might be a 7 or an 8. But if you're not and you just want to go into the lagoon, then it's probably quite expensive. The other lagoon that we went to at the back end of our holiday was called the Secret Lagoon, and this cost us only £41. And just because of how cheap it was, I'd say that this was a value for money score of about an 8 out of 10. The reason it's not higher than an 8 is because it's quite out of the way from anything else. But if all you want is a warm bath, then you're sorted really. The Zodiac tour cost us £115. And similar to the glacier hike and the whale watching tours, if you've never been on a glacial lagoon before, then this is well worth the money. You spend a good amount of time on the lagoon, just cruising in between the icebergs, going right up to the glacier. Not too close obviously in case there's anything falling on you, but it's just a superb experience. I would probably give this a 9 out of 10. There's just not a lot wrong with this tour, it's really good. Next up is the Golden Circle tour, which cost us £117, and we had a really knowledgeable guide who went in depth on practically everything that you could want to go in depth on. We could have equally just rented the car a day earlier and done this all ourselves. It's a well-trodden route that I'd say you don't need a guide for. You're just paying for the convenience at your own time flexibility really. So if you're someone who doesn't like schedules and fixed times to explore each stop, then the Golden Circle tour probably should be done by yourself rather than a guided one. And so for this reason, I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10. I have saved the best tour till last though. The absolute 10 out of 10 value for money was the lava show. We spent 67 quid on this, and it blew our socks off. It was 40 minutes long, and it was hands down the best money I spent in Iceland, and possibly one of the best things I've ever spent money on a tour abroad on. Something completely unique to the destination that we were in. You know, seeing lava reheated and then poured into a funnel into a room was just absolutely mind-blowing really. 10 out of 10, value for money, easy. I would have paid double that, no problem. Our final category is the miscellaneous expenses, which is just mostly food and drink and the odd souvenir. We spent £289 here in total, and I think the major thing to highlight are the eating out costs. I highlighted in my main Iceland video that this bowl of noodles cost us £25 per bowl, and they weren't even that good. Plus, this didn't even take into account any drinks, which are also really expensive, particularly if you want alcohol. We ate out only 4 times in 6 days, so most of our meals were cooked at the hostel or prepared for on the go. So if you're not willing to make up sandwiches, you know, for lunchtime excursions and stuff, then you'll likely spend more than our £48 daily average on foods and drinks. So I hope you found this video interesting or helpful. That is a wrap on my Iceland budget breakdown video. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you want to catch upcoming trips to Copenhagen and Brazil. But until then, thanks for watching. See you next time.